Well, good evening. I'd like to call to order this planning meeting for the town of Saugeen Shores, and I can extend a welcome to everyone in the chambers this evening. Our first order of business is additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda, and we have nothing under that. Our next order is a declaration of pecuniary interest, and I'll remind every member of your responsibility. You can do so now or if it arises on the agenda. Declared then our fourth order of business is adoption of minutes, and I have a motion that's been moved by Councillor Rich and seconded by Deputy Mayor Charbonneau that the planning minutes dated October the 16th, 2017 be approved as circulated. Is there any errors or omissions? Comments? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next item on the agenda is public meetings, and this evening we have two. We'll conduct the public meeting where we'll ask our planner to give the report, the applicant's planner to give the report. We'll ask any comments of the public, and then we'll ask committee if they have any questions of anybody that's presented. So our first public meeting then is zoning bylaw 69-17.44, Richard and Jennifer Lamb of Miramichi Bay Road, and I'll turn it over to our planner to make the presentation.
Great. Hi. Thanks for having me. As mentioned, that is the application up there. So this is Richard and Jennifer Lamb, zoning bylaw amendment, and this is just for information tonight. So in terms of an overview of the proposal is to permit the construction of a standalone accessory building on the site. So it's currently a vacant lot. They wish to build a garage shed, and then intend to build their primary dwelling in the period around 2022 or 2024. So the intended short-term use is for a garage for storage for outdoor recreational equipment, and then repurpose the accessory structure in 5+ years as an attached double-car garage and workshop, and then build the primary residence. The zoning bylaw does not allow for an accessory use on a property without the primary use. So in this case, the primary use would be a dwelling, and so it doesn't allow for the accessory use of storage to precede that primary use. So in terms of the site details, as I mentioned, it is a vacant lot. Their surrounding uses are residential and woodlot. There are currently no services as it's vacant, but it could hook up to municipal water and would be serviced by a private septic, and it is on a year-round municipal road. So the proposed site plan for the building is as you can see there. So it's proposed to be just an accessory structure right now. So the kind of green and brown parts on that plan would be in the 5+ years. It would just be the accessory building for now as proposed, and the EP zone at the back would not see any development. So in terms of the land use policies, of course we defer to the PPS for general directions. In terms of the Bruce County OP, it's in the primary urban community. In the local OP, it's Shoreline Residential and Special Policy Area 4. In the zoning bylaw, it's zoned Residential First Density Special and Environmental Protection Special. And the proposed zoning bylaw is a Residential First Density Special that would permit the standalone accessory structure, and the environmental protection would remain unchanged. So the EP zone on the lot is not proposed to be touched in this application. So we did circulate this proposal to the town, and they had a number of comments. So if the bylaw as it stands would be, or as directed by the applicants, they wish to apply for a permanent zoning bylaw change. And so if council wishes to approve this, the staff recommends that an agreement be entered into with the landowners to ensure that the accessory structure is removed if the main dwelling is not constructed in the agreed upon time frame. And the town has indicated that they intend to collect development charges for the residential use up front prior to any construction. Now, in terms of the planning department's kind of response to this, we would encourage the town to make sure that conditions are sufficiently robust to ensure that you're able to enforce those conditions in 5+ years and that the accessory structure can be demolished. We do have some concerns that if we make the zoning permanent, there might be legal issues in 5 years' time when you're trying to demolish something that's been proposed as, that's been accepted as a legal use. We would propose, if the town goes this way, we would propose applying a condition that the owners be barred from connecting to municipal services or developing on private services until the primary dwelling is construction, so no servicing until that time. In terms of agency comments, the SPCA back in 2003 supported the construction of a detached dwelling and detached garage on this property, and it's their opinion that the special area 4 apply to the whole area, and mostly this special area 4. Let me just. It just has to do with the important national heritage features of the area. So the SPCA has indicated that they are confident that all of their interests can be addressed through their permitting processes. So the application of the SPCA 4 on the entire property could trigger some provisions and future developments on the site, because currently only the eastern half of the property is included. But the applicant has not been asked to complete an EIS at this stage. The SPCA doesn't require one for their review, and we're confident that all of the natural heritage elements can be addressed through their review process and moving forward. We haven't received any public comments regarding this application. In terms of the Planning Act checklist, we received the complete application. It's been circulated, and the public notice has gone out, and we are now in the public meeting. So in terms of provincial interests and moving forward with that, an archaeological assessment has been completed on the property, and it was confirmed that the property has been subject to deep and extensive development disturbance, so there's no archaeological interest on the property, so we don't have to worry about that moving forward. And then in terms of the natural heritage features, an EIS is not required. There's enough developable land outside of the EP zone on the property. In terms of the local Saugeen Shores official plan, the issues that have arisen from that, the shoreline residential designation is meant to recognize the historic cottage use of the shoreline area, while acknowledging that many of these cottages are now being converted to year-round use. As such, the policies allow for additional assessments that may be required. So special policy area 4 generally encompasses the lands west of Glacial Lake Nipissing Bluff, south of South Street in Southampton. And it recognizes the area's important natural heritage features, such as significant woodlands, significant wildlife habitat, fish habitat, all of that. But it does still allow for new residential uses in the SPCA 4, or SPA 4. So new development may be required, but may be allowed. And since this is all out of the EH zone, there's no real concerns in terms of natural heritage. In terms of the comprehensive zoning bylaw, the proposal is to change the existing R121 zoning to allow for an accessory building on the site without the primary residential use. So section 3.1.7 of the zoning bylaw states that no accessory building shall be erected or used until the principal building, structure, or use is erected. Of course, the concept of accessory requires that primary use. These provisions exist in order to ensure that the primary use is constructed and that what should be an accessory use, in this case storage, doesn't become the primary use on a property. The applicant has submitted a letter, which is Appendix C of the report, stating their intent to build a residence on the property in 5+ years' time. The applicant is seeking a zoning bylaw amendment, which would allow for this accessory use in perpetuity, but upon which conditions may be imposed. The amendment could potentially pose issues in the future where the municipality might try to guarantee the construction of a primary dwelling but has allowed the accessory use as legally conforming through passing of this bylaw. Another option that the committee could choose to consider is a temporary use bylaw. This is a tool that's been designed through the Planning Act to address these types of situations. This would allow for the accessory use to exist on the property for a period of 3 years, and then would be subject to up to 3 years extensions beyond that point. So it could be anywhere between a 1 and 3 year extension after the initial 3 years have come up, and it could continue to be extended as long as council deemed it appropriate. The temporary use bylaw would allow the accessory structure to be legal for the duration of the bylaw, but as soon as it expired, then the accessory use would revert to being non-conforming, and the municipality could then, in full confidence, pursue demolition of the accessory structure if the primary dwelling is not constructed. So those are kind of the options that are on the table for this information session. So we're happy to answer any questions that you might have about those. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thanks. I think what we'll do is, again, we'll get the applicants, let the applicants speak, and then the public speak, and then we'll entertain any questions of any of them. So is the applicant present? Would you like to speak to the committee? If you come here and use the mic, so we're televised, so there, or maybe that's it. Webcast, I think is the correct term.
Great. Thank you. I'm new to this whole format, so just a little history about Jennifer, my wife, and myself. We've been coming to Southampton for the better part of 20 years, bringing our kids. We also have family that are located here on North Shore as well as in Southampton, and we also want to join them in 4 to 5 years' time. And the principal residence that we're looking at building will be for our retirement. That being the case, we don't need a place right now that we have to worry about security and possessions, that sort of thing, for as a primary residence. But we do have a lot of bikes and tennis and kayaks and canoes, etc., that we would like to store up here, so then we can use it as a family location. So, so I've tried to address the concerns Leah Barry had brought to my attention as far as security of county, and but the option that was the two options that were presented, one was related to a temporary condition that would be reviewed in 3 years, and unfortunately that's within my retirement time, so there's no way 3 years would work, but because we're looking at anywhere from 4 to 6 years for the development of the primary. And that concerned me, that if it all of a sudden the council changed or the rules changed, then the term I think she used was demolish. And it's a significant capital investment, because it would be about $100,000 to build the 25 by 40 foot garage. So that was the one option. The other one that was mentioned was restricting services. The electricity is kind of one that would be kind of necessary for the garage for security purposes, because we're not going to be there, so I want to put some sort of security measures there, and water is just kind of a natural service that we would pipe into the garage. I just want to address those two concerns, and I'll turn the podium over to my wife now.
Well, if there's questions, I can take those.
Okay, I think if you have nothing else, I'm going to ask, is there, and we may have some questions, Jerry, so don't leave right away. You can go back to your seat. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak to this application? None? Then committee. Any questions from committee? Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I don't have a question for the Lambs, but I do have a question, I guess, for Tessa on the report. I'm looking at, gotta get this up again here. This is page 3 of the report from section 2, matters arising from interdepartmental consultation. Bullet point number 1 says, if council wish to approve the bylaw, staff recommend entering into an agreement with the landowners to provide for sufficient securities to ensure the accessory structure is removed if a main dwelling is not constructed in the agreed-upon time frame, and to ensure development charges are paid upfront prior to construction of any structure on the property. So my question is about that last phrase where you say development charges are paid upfront prior to construction of any structure on the property. Do you mean prior to construction of the proposed garage?
Yeah, so those are the town's comments directly, and my impression from Jay and from town staff is that they'd be seeking the development charges as a residential use up front prior to the construction of the house. So prior to anything, the garage, prior to anything being constructed, they're going to seek development charges.
Can I ask a question?
Okay,
about the
sure.
Development charges? Is that a one-time charge?
Yes.
Okay, so we would pay that either now or later anyways.
Yep.
Okay.
You wouldn't get out of it. We'll get it out of you.
But
Question.
that is a commitment if it came to that. So that's something
They're normally collected at the point of issuance of the building permit, so you wouldn't get a building permit unless you paid the development charges. I believe Councilman Minaj has got a question.
Makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would ask the applicants, we have a zoning bylaw statement that says that we cannot design an accessory building that permits human occupancy. So will you be forwarding a draft drawing of what this garage will actually look like?
Yeah, we don't have it available right now because the builder that we selected wouldn't provide us the drawings until we've got the commitment to do the building. So he said you have to get the amendment before I'm willing to release the drawings. So we don't take the drawings and then go somewhere else. I assume you mean the specific schematic of it?
Exactly. We've had other garages that have had second floors and sliding doors facing the lake, things like that. So those are indications that the intention is to have them be human occupied, and our bylaw doesn't allow for that.
Right. Yeah, we have no intention of occupying it. We have our in-laws are just down the street. They have a fully functional house already. So it wouldn't be worth our risk.
We're just
Vice
bringing all of our gear back and forth and we're tired.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd be curious to know the idea of sufficient securities. Development charges alone are in the neighborhood, I believe, of about $18,000. So what, do we have a sense from the town of what, in addition to that, would be deemed to be sufficient? Like, is it a, oh.
We haven't settled on a number, but I'm trying not to be cagey, but 15,000 plus the DCs, we have to make it sufficiently desirable for them to want to build. So we don't want it so low that they can afford to walk away. We want them to commit. So there needs to be some financial heft to that.
Okay. I also just, when I heard about no servicing to the building, I wanted to clarify if that meant both electricity and water, or just not water, or just not electricity. Because to me, it would make sense that, if they're putting in a security into the mix and paying the development charges, it would make sense that beyond electricity to the building, that a water pipe go in there, because it's having a water pipe in, it would be there eventually anyway. And I think it just makes sense in a lot of ways to enable that kind of servicing. So I'm just curious, is the intent to prohibit electricity and water? Because I wouldn't agree to that.
Go ahead. I think we're really just collecting information, and we will come back with a recommendation that we can deal with. I think we can deal with at the committee.
I don't think we had ever proposed not allowing electricity. It would have been municipal water, and I think we would, because we wouldn't want any kind of human habitation. We would definitely want to impose a condition where no septic would be allowed to be built.
Okay, any further questions? If not, thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is, again, it's a zoning bylaw amendment 68-17.44. It's care of Tom Fenton of 77 Bruce Road 25. And again, I'll turn it over to our planner, Tessa.
We're going to take turns, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind.
Okay, that's not Tessa, that's Bruce.
Okay, the application from Fenton is related to 77 Bruce Road 25. And this is a proposal for a severance to create a vacant residential building lot. The development proposal would facilitate the severance of a vacant residential building lot. The planned development zone does not, I should back up, there is a planned development zone on the property currently, as it lies within the primary urban settlement area of Port Elgin. The planned development is used somewhat like a holding zone in some respects. It does not permit new residential development. So the proposal would be to rezone a portion of the subject lands to R1 special policy, potentially, in order to facilitate residential development and permit an increased height for an accessory building to permit a height of 7.9 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a maximum height of 5 meters for an accessory building. And to rezone a portion of the subject lands to R170 in order to correct a mapping error. And that's related to a lot adjacent to this, the proposed development. The current use is agriculture on the property. Now there are some lots along the roadway there that are in various uses right now, but the designation on the lands is residential. There is residential, agricultural, institutional, and commercial use that surround the subject property, and this is within the primary urban settlement area, where the intent is that there will be full municipal services, both water and sewers. The proposal here is to develop on municipal water and private septic. And it has access to Bruce Road 25, or CAW Road, whichever name you prefer to know it as. This is the roadway that leads down past the Unifor former CAW buildings. The application was circulated to agencies, and I should start with the municipalities' comments and concerns. The comments received from the town include 4 points. The proposed severed lot shall not encumber the future southerly extension of Ridge Street. Ridge Street is essentially in line with proposed subdivision north of it, and would come out on this property close to, but wouldn't interfere with the Ridge Street Ridge Street. The development shall contribute 5% in cash in lieu of parkland dedication for the severed lot. The development shall install municipal water servicing to the severed lot, and the developer is responsible for his share of contributions for external infrastructure works that would be required. Conservation Authority had no real concerns, other than to point out that this area can be prone to overland flooding or essentially surface runoff, and they recommended that any development on the property be elevated so that it is above the existing ground surface. This is just typical for any locations where drainage is sort of sheet flow over land that is uncontrolled, to put it another way. Conditions could be imposed, and this is for information, conditions could be imposed through the zoning bylaw amendment that would address overland flooding issues and ensure that buildings were not at risk. So this needn't be a deal breaker with regard to development on the property. The application was circulated to the public as well. Didn't really receive any comments from the public that I'm aware of. Certainly not at the time of writing this report. As is customary on many properties within the town, there is concern related to provincial interests with regard to archaeological potential on properties, and in particular properties near the shoreline of Lake Huron and rivers and tributaries and so on that would have provided potable water for former settlements and so on, are always subject to review of some sort. There was Scarlett Johannes did prepare a stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment for the subject site. The report was completed in July 2017, and there is a recommendation in that report that no further archaeological assessment is required on the property. That results from her work and study of the property. There is the potential for significant natural heritage features on the property, wildlife habitat, potential habitat for threatened and endangered species that should be considered. The Conservation Authority did not recommend the preparation of an EIS, as they feel that the issues there are known, or at least reasonably well known, and that there'd be nothing gained from an environmental impact study on the property. The threatened or endangered species must be addressed by the owner of the land prior to development, as it is their responsibility, not the responsibility or the town's. The land is within the primary urban area for Port Elgin, and therefore the policies that govern development on the property or that provide information for development on the property are primarily in the Town of Saugeen Shores local official plan. The subject site is designated residential in the official plan and has planned development zoning on it. The Saugeen Shores OP sets out a number of considerations for subdivision by consent. This application may not meet all the criteria as laid out in section 2.11.2.1.1 for new lots by consent. In particular, the division of land represents orderly and efficient use of the land, and its approval would not hinder future development of the retained lands. And secondly, the proposed development meets the requirements outlined in section 5124 of the Planning Act. 5124 in the Planning Act deals with subdivision of land through plans of subdivision, essentially, and details the requirements that development must meet in order to be approved in a plan of subdivision. These conditions may be difficult to meet as the lot is in planned development zone, as described previously. Sewer and water servicing is intended to be by municipal water supply and municipal sewers, which is not proposed at this point in time with this proposal. While the proposal has the opportunity to hook up to municipal water, municipal sewers are still forthcoming and may not be available for perhaps a number of years yet. As per the OP, this proposal may then be considered premature until such time as municipal sewers are made available. Should the committee decide to support the application, the OP would then direct that approval be conditional on the property owner entering in an agreement to be held on title that would require connection to municipal services when they became available. The zoning bylaw would be amended as part of this proposal through application Z68 to allow for residential development on the property through a zoning change from planned development to an R1 special. That concludes the information report, and be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Bruce. And we'll get to, is the applicant or anyone representing the applicant here? Would you like to speak? Oh, yes.
What would you like me to speak about?
If you would like to say anything to this application, Tom, go ahead. If you're not, then we'll just turn it over for questions.
I think the only thing that was mentioned in my application was like a private sewer, and this house project probably isn't going to happen for 5-6 years, so I would hope municipal would be there by then.
Okay, then any questions? And we'll start with Councillor Mike.
My question.
Sorry, just hang on. Is there any other member of the public would like to speak to this application? I apologize for that, Mike. Okay, go ahead.
That's okay, Mr. Mayor. Mine's more of a housekeeping item, I think, and maybe through you to Jay Posner, perhaps, or the planner. But the proposed several lots shall not encumber the future southerly extension of Ridge Street. I know there are plans for Bruce Street running north-south as, Bruce Power Bypass, I'll call it, or more direct route, running north-south right to the 10th concession through to County Road 25. I understand Bruce Street's coming on, and on the mapping up top there, I think that line right beside the barn on the north side of County Road 25, top right-hand, the barn in the picture, is that not Bruce Street there? I'm just wondering in the wording here, Mr. Mayor, if the proposed severed lot shall not encumber the future southerly extension of Ridge Street. Are we really talking about Bruce Street?
Yes. We're meaning
It's not Ridge Street. Correct. It's just maybe for the next report. Thank you.
Councillor Minaj.
Mine is similar, and I'd like to ask the reason for an accessory building to be granted the extra height at this location in a residential lot. So I would want more information on the accessory building. Back to my last comment that accessory buildings shall not be used for occupation, human occupation. So without a drawing that shows what the accessory building is going to be, then you won't get my support at these committee meetings anymore, and for as long as I'm on the committee. Bruce Road 33 is being adjusted, and it's going to change coming across the back of that agricultural property and marry up with Bruce Street on Bruce Road 25. I would ask that the Bruce County authorities, planning authorities here, overlay those changes and any of the proposed zoning changes that are anticipated on that property. I believe that that's coming faster than we think, and I'd like to see those kinds of that information on this drawing.
I can speak to that. That is in really in the conceptual stage right now. You have no exact location for the road. They haven't acquired any land for it yet. That's just a conceptual design, what was included in the environmental assessment for the whole improvements to County Road 25. So the design of it, we can't give you that right now, Neil, and I don't know how soon that would be. The county will proceed for that when the need arises, probably when the extension of Bruce Street is planned out to County Road 25. And I'm speculating there.
Thank you. I have two others. So the sewers and the water issue, I thought with the Bruce County Road 25 changes and with our work on Bruce County Road 25, that we were going to start moving services in that direction. So I'd like to know if and when that's going to take place. And finally, there's a comment that it says that this is the urban area of Port Elgin. And so is that just how we're delineating things today, that we're saying this is Port Elgin and that is Southampton, but we keep forgetting about Saugeen Township. This is Saugeen Township. So the former Saugeen Township. So I just want clarity on when we talk about the urban enclave or area called Port Elgin. Is that what you mean?
I think it's just Bruce, it's probably just a missing. It should be the urban or primary urban envelope for Saugeen Shores. It is one urban envelope for the two towns. Okay? It's easy to get mixed up because of the location, but that's really technically what it is. Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of issues that I guess one question and one issue, I guess. The one issue I have is with regard to the SVCA comment. This property is not within the regulated area of the Conservation Authority. I don't think it would be covered by Section 3.1 of the PPS, no natural hazards. Yet they're talking about flooding and talking about instituting more rules and regulations on this development based on I don't know what. And I guess if I asked Bart Toby to bring the building code into this room, he'd have to get a wheelbarrow to bring it in here because it's that big. I feel like there's enough content in there to protect this building from whatever flooding might be there, and that the building officials can look after that without us adding another reg to this development based on flooding in an area where we haven't even identified flooding as a problem. No provincial regulation, no municipal regulation. So just dreaming flooding up, I think. So anyway, I think on one hand, I think that we should make sure not to take any action on the SVCA recommendation on that point. On the second point, I guess as a question, is there a law in place or some other set of regulations in place that says if we were to bring water or sewer past a property that they must connect? I mean, we brought sewer past a whole bunch of properties since I've been around, and those properties are required to connect to that sewer. Am I correct about that?
I think I'm not sure if the question is leading or what we're saying, and that is that this area should develop by plan of subdivision on full services. That's how it should develop. And is there a way to service this with municipal services prior to a plan of subdivision? Possibly, but it should consider the larger parcel and how that's going to be developed over time.
I get that. All I'm asking though is that I mean, we're talking again about putting another condition on this agreement that they must connect when it comes by, when it becomes available. But when it becomes available, they must connect. No condition is required in this document to enact that. They will have to connect whether we have a condition on this agreement or not. Am I correct?
I mean, the council has the authority to do that at the time. I think really probably why the only reason you would do that was if it was a subsequent owner was going to buy that, they would know that this was maybe, I don't know, Luke, but that you're right. We have extended sewer and water in many locations and forced everyone to hook up and forced them to pay their share.
I would say that is the common practice of the town of Saugeen Shores, frankly, the exclusive and only practice of the town of Saugeen Shores. When we run sewer, people must connect, and we've always done it that way, and we always will, in my guess. So again, this is a condition that's not required and should not be imposed. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you.
Yep.
There's a reference in the report about the potential or the idea that maybe this is premature because the servicing isn't there. I heard the applicant say that they weren't intending to build for 4 or 5 years. So I'm curious about the additional little element in there about the extra height on the accessory building, because the accessory building can't be built until the primary residence is built, which is 4 or 5 years down the road. And it very specifically, our decision reflects a drawing that we have. We don't have actual plans. So in my mind, it's kind of premature to have that element in there if there's really no intention to build for a number of years. And we're basically saying that if we approve this, something has to happen exactly as drawn in this drawing. And we don't know why, or the applicant themselves said they weren't planning to build for a number of years. So I'm curious to know why that element is in there. So that would be a question I would have. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to clarify one thing. This is, again, a conceptual drawing. If the zoning passed, the zoning will set the setbacks of the buildings and then the massing of the buildings and the lot coverage of the buildings. So this is, it doesn't mean that is exactly where that building is going to go if you approve this land use, because it can be whatever, if it's whatever the residential, whatever the zone that potentially goes on there, those requirements are already in our zoning bylaw. It's just, so I hope I've clarified that and not confused you. Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is also about the accessory building. Councillor Milage asked about the reason for the request to permit the increased height from 5 meters to 7.9 meters. So I didn't hear an answer to that. If there's a specific request, I wonder if we could get an answer on why that's required.
Do you want to speak to that, Tom?
The lot is for my daughter and son-in-law, and he works on antique cars and wants to put a hoist in. So he needs extended height.
Councillor Dave Mayette, did you? Okay. Any further question?
Follow up on that?
Absolutely.
So this is a residential, we're going to make this a residential zone property, and then we're saying that that's a private use. It's not a home occupational use. It's not a commercial use. We're going to say it's okay to extend the height of the accessory building for personal use, but we're not expecting to hear about a home occupational use or a commercial use in the future.
Correct.
Okay. Any further questions from the committee? If not, thanks very much. Thanks, Tom.
Okay.
There was 2 recommendations there, both with the former one and this one, and maybe you probably want motions on those. The recommendations were, and I think for the first one, which was the land planning report, that Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores receives the proposed zoning bylaw amendment Z 6917.44 as information, and that staff will return at a subsequent meeting with a recommendation. I don't really think we need a motion to do that. It's just for information purposes. Or would you like a motion? Yeah, it's just a recommendation. Okay, that's right. Yeah. So that is the recommendation. We will take a vote on it. I'm getting this clear now. So, is there any questions to the recommendation? All in favor? That's carried. So the next one then is the this one we just dealt with, and the recommendation is, that the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores receives proposed zoning bylaw amendment Z 68-17.44 as information, and the staff will return at a subsequent meeting with a recommendation. Any questions? Further questions? All in favor? That's carried. So that's the end of our public meetings. Now we have some reports and recommendations to deal with. And the first one is, it's about Mystic Cove's Development Incorporated for 212 Concession 10. And again, I'll turn it over to our planners for the presentation.
Okay, we held an information session last month related to this development, and the application by Mystic Cove Developments would facilitate draft approval of a plan that consists of 30 single detached lots, 1 block for possible future residential development, 1 block for conservation, 1 municipal street, and multiple blocks for road widening, utilities, a walkway, and reserves. And there were studies and reports that were provided with that application, and there has been a revised plan since the application was brought to you for information purposes. That change, the modification to the plan, involves the rear of and I may be a little bit out of order here in terms of the presentation, but the modification to the plan involves a shift of the property boundaries of lots 13 to 15 in the plan, which is at the northeastern boundary of the proposed subdivision, and also at the southeastern limit. It would extend the lots somewhat beyond what the former plan showed. The adjustments are relatively minor. It doesn't increase or change the number of lots in the plan. It is an adjustment to the boundary of the subdivision along the east side, where there is no other development and the property or the developer owns the lands. And it would simply provide deeper lots and wouldn't alter the tree retention plan that was proposed or given as information at the last meeting. So with that, then I'll proceed to the planning application checklist. We're through the issues related to plan of subdivision. As I mentioned, there were no significant changes proposed as a part of that revised plan. The tree retention plan is still the same as far as I know. There's been no changes. The Conservation Authority has reviewed the changes to the lot boundaries proposed in the modified plan, has no concerns with those changes. The application was proposed to develop on municipal water, the use of municipal water, and private septic systems, and there is no change related to that. There were comments received from the public circulation related to three issues. One was the proximity of existing dwellings on Miramichi Bay Road, requesting that the development be moved further to the east. The protection of environmental features, including forest cover loss in the subdivision, and process and timing questions, including noise and disruptions associated with construction activity during installation of roads and services and build-out of the subdivision. These are issues that, in my opinion, have been addressed. The proposal to move the development further east would essentially move the development further into EP zoned land. The protection of the environmental features has been reviewed by the Conservation Authority, and the proposed tree retention plan and planting plan meets their requirements for protection of the environmental features on the property and the land. And the questions related to noise and disruptions associated with construction are unavoidable in development of homes and residential development or any form of building development, and simply it cannot proceed without some noise. Just as a point, I suppose generally the construction occurs during the daytime hours, so it's unlikely that there would be noise after 11 p.m. at night or before 7 a.m. in the morning, and it would be an infringement on the rights of the property owner to not allow him to develop because of noise from the construction. There was also some discussion at the information meeting about the servicing of the lots proposed to be on private sewage disposal systems rather than by municipal sewers. The main concern here was with the distance of the existing the proposed development from an existing pumping station that's on concession 10. There was a cost estimate prepared by Cobide Engineering that determined that the differential in cost would amount to about $18,000 per lot, raising the cost from $10,000 for on-site sewage disposal for each lot to about $28,000 per lot if it had to connect to the municipal sewer system and provide upgrades to the system in order to be able to connect to municipal sewers. This is nearly triple the cost. It is onerous, I believe, and is not warranted as the Lakeshore residential in your official plan can proceed on-site sewage disposal systems. So this would be somewhat onerous in terms of an additional demand on the developer to provide those municipal services. The developer has satisfied provincial interests with regard to archaeological potential, the servicing policies of the provincial policies prefer full municipal infrastructure but permit partial services to allow for infilling and minor rounding out of existing development on partial services, which it is felt that this development concurs with. The municipal waters are available to the area, and so it should proceed with municipal water, but sewage services are not available at this time at a reasonable cost to the developer, and so the recommendation would be that it proceed on private sewage services on site for each property. Environmental impact study was completed and addressed the natural heritage policies, and there has been a tree planting and retention plan that has been proposed for this development to maintain as much as possible the wooded areas on the property, and that has been approved or at least agreed to with the Conservation Authority that they have adequately addressed the woodlands on the property. The proposed subdivision is located in the shoreline residential designation, permits residential uses. The environmental impact study and tree retention plans have been completed to address the special policy area 4 related to natural heritage features. Preliminary stormwater management works include quality improvement through the oil and grit separator, catch basins before it is discharged eventually to Lake Huron. The environmental hazard designation has yet to be finalized, but are referenced in the draft conditions and will not affect development on the proposed lots. The application includes a zoning amendment to change the plan development zoning and environmental protection, or rather just the plan development zoning. The environmental protection zoning will remain as before. The plan development will be changed to residential first density, special provision 2 in the area that is subject to the proposed plan of subdivision. Block 39, the Conservation Authority, the conservation block in the development would be zoned to environmental protection. That concludes my report, and the recommendation is that the application be approved with the attached conditions of draft approval, and these address sidewalk and sewers, various infrastructure and facilities provided in primary urban settlements. It addresses easements for drainage works and conservation of trees and trail access future trail access. It would implement the stormwater management plan for the property and provide for numerous other controls, including construction, erosion and sediment control plans, and so on and so forth for the development on the property. There's nothing to add really to the draft conditions of approval that hasn't been discussed in one or another points in the application and information presentation. So I recommend that the committee approve the zoning for the property as proposed, and that the adopt the subdivision 41T 217 Mystic Cove Developments adopt draft plan of application that you have before you tonight.
Excuse me. Thank you, Bruce. So we do have a recommendation that Bruce has covered. I'll read it, and then we'll take any questions, and then we'll vote. It's recommended that the zoning bylaw amendment Z-19-17.44 be approved, and that council for the town of Saugeen Shores adopt the draft bylaw attached. The council of the town of Saugeen Shores recommend to the County of Bruce Approval Authority that proposed draft plan of subdivision 41T-2017 04.44 be approved with the conditions of draft approval attached. Questions? Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My first question is about the tree retention plan. You mentioned in your report that the SVCA staff has an outstanding concern regarding the means of achieving 30% total post-construction forest site cover. So I just wanted to clarify, that is something that is still being worked on? Is that the idea and will be finalized, or has that concern been removed?
That concern has been removed. The tree retention plan has addressed that issue on as far as they're concerned. And so we had initial clearance, if you will, from the Conservation Authority based on the former plan, and we got confirmation today that they have no concerns with the changes to the current plan, as it didn't affect the tree retention for the proposed development. And so they are still in agreement that the tree retention plan addresses their concerns.
So as a follow-up question, are we still looking at a 30%, or do we have a calculated percentage of what that forest site cover is going to be?
I don't have that number. Only the clearance from the Conservation Authority that their concerns have been met.
But can we be assured that it is at least a minimum of 30%?
I can't tell you right now if it is or isn't.
Okay. Well, I would need to know that. Thanks. My other question, Mr. Mayor, is about stormwater and the stormwater runoff into Miramichi Bay, which is an area which has a lot of wildlife. Has there been any study? I couldn't find it. There may have been a study about the possible effects of stormwater runoff into the bay. Has there been anything done specifically with regard to this proposed project?
There was a stormwater management plan that addressed drainage from the proposed subdivision, and there was quality improvement by way of these interceptor manholes that collect oils and sediment. But that is the extent of the improvement that's provided, and then it discharges to the Lake Huron.
So what I was wondering about is, was there anything, I did see that, I just wondered if there was anything specifically about the, was any consideration given to the effect of the runoff upon the wildlife in that bay? Because it's a pretty significant number of birds in there.
guess I'm not clear on what would be affecting them. Like, what is it in particular that was concerning? I'm not sure. There was the stormwater management plan that was prepared. That has been reviewed by the Conservation Authority, and we rely upon them to identify quality improvement that is not being provided that they would like to see for the protection of wildlife, fish, and so on. They didn't raise any issues with regard to that.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With your permission, I'm going to be a while. What I've got to discuss is related to the Water and Sanitary Sewer Servicing Master Plan 2014 report by B.M. Ross. I spent almost half an hour, maybe longer, on the phone today with the author of that report, Steve Burns, and discussed this sewage area. So when we look at the report of 2014, Mr. Mayor, it says there are sections on page 58, 5.4.3, service to developed but unserviced areas. And it speaks in paragraphs. It says the provision of full sanitary servicing to this area is consistent with the town's official plan and provincial planning documents. Servicing will address potential public health and environmental issues related to the use of septics. This is somebody we commissioned to give us a report. And it says that Area 18, which is, I submit, which is on this map here, which was part of the report. Area 18, it sounds like something from science fiction. Area 18 is in this category. It is probable that there will be a combination of gravity sewers and individual grinder pumps in this area. Wastewater flows will be to the concession 10 sewer pumping station. When I look at it from, so the problem with this report, now that I've done the study of it, is that it addresses all of the sewage requirements from the south towards the 10th concession. And it deals with everything from the north, Southampton, all the way south to the 10th concession. And this particular new subdivision is not in their it is not in their sights. They didn't know it was coming, and they didn't address it in this study. And that's fair to them. So I asked about this. So Area 18 is the closest to this proposed development. And I said, talk to me about grinder pumps. I didn't fully understand grinder pumps. And grinder pumps are a pressurized sewage system that can be installed. Not only can it be installed in this subdivision for these lots at approximately $2,000 to $2,500 per lot, it can also be retro-installed into Pegasus Trails and Collard and Carter Drive at an estimate of $4,000 to $5,000 a lot. And we can force that sewage into a force main to the 10th concession sewer pumping station. After which I discussed the option for a lift station. And we spoke about the lift station, and the planners have given quite a bit of information saying that it's onerous and it would cost somewhere in the neighborhood of $800,000 on this project. The engineering author of this report didn't agree, and he suggested that it would be more in order, including, he said, you know, there's going to be some here and some there. If you put the standby generator inside a building, it's going to cost a little bit more. But he said, all in, he would half that price. So my point isn't to throw that back. My point is to say we have a master plan on our servicing for sewage. In particular, we have sewer and water. This is the sanitary sewer that I'm looking at. And it is telling us that the responsible thing to do is to get out of the business of septic systems where we can. We have a 30-home subdivision here, and we have an additional total in that same vicinity of relatively new lots, of another 77 lots, with some of those remaining to be developed. So what I'm asking is that, in fact, Mr. Burns suggested that lift station of the size that would be required. It's the smallest lift station you can build. So a new small lift station, which wasn't considered in the engineering studies and reports that came with this subdivision. It could service 300 homes, 300 lots in that area, which to me is the right thing to do. So when I looked through the sections of this plan report that was given to us, there are numerous references to small local grinder pumps or small sewer pumping stations are required. That's the North Shore Road. It's in the table in the report. It says other extensions. It is important to note that some of these areas may require local pumping stations to address topography issues. So I get it that these things could be expensive, but this gentleman is saying not so. Not so as expensive as we're hearing. And I know that we have our own engineer as well who could probably additionally shed some light on this. What I'm asking for, and I have a motion to defer that I have seconded, and I can present that, is that we ask staff to ask BM Ross to come back and do a revision to this plan, in particular to look at these subdivisions, this subdivision, and the ones close by. And so Acton Street is also being developed, planned development, all the way to the 10th concession. And we ask for a revised report saying what are their beliefs. Do a good report that either supports what I'm saying or refutes what I'm saying, and then it would be an easier decision for me to make. At this time, I can't support this, and I'm asking for a deferral.
This because it's a motion to defer. Then it's been moved by Councillor Minaj, seconded by Councillor Grace. Defer any decision to support the Mystic Cove (parenthesis approve) the Mystic Cove Development 41T-2007-01-44 and Z 19.17.44 until such time as BM Ross has had an opportunity to review the sewer servicing options further for this development and revise the town of Saugeen Shore and advise the town of Saugeen Shores and revise the town of Saugeen Shores water and sanitary sewer servicing master plan 2014 report. I guess some motion to defer is no debate on this motion. There is that's the motion to defer. It takes precedent over the recommendation. So I'll call the question. Is it first of all? Is it clear? Yes. Go ahead.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. That is more than a motion to defer. There's quite a bit in that motion. I don't think we can handle that motion that way, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think the way to deal with it then would remove, if the mover and seconder is remove the final paragraph, which is until such time as BM Ross has had the opportunity on and on and on to do the master plan. So the motion would read, defer any decision to support or approve the Mystic Cove Development 41T 2017-01-44 and Z 19-17.44. That would be it. Not to the motion to defer. That is the motion, or unless you want to change it. Well, I'm trying to get it.
I understand what
just use your microphone. If it's just strictly to the wording of the motion, and that's it. Councillor Griggs.
My comment is to the wording of the motion, because I wouldn't support it if it was a motion to defer without any explanation as to why. I wouldn't second it, I mean.
Members may make motions and make a motion to defer, and then we make more motions after that. Right? You don't have to. You can make as many motions as you want, and you don't have to make. You can make a motion to defer, and then you can make another motion.
As long as it is pertinent to the issue on the agenda here, not about a new master study or anything of that nature at all. So the motion then is, and I'll read it, and we'll call the question, is if you're fine with this wording. Yes. No, I'm not. Take it back and rewrite it.
Need an explanation as to how we get past saying no to something. I'm not saying no to the development. I'm saying I'm not saying no to a new master plan study. I'm asking for a small revision that incorporates this local area into the pumping station and find out what that will cost and find out how much the true numbers are, not the numbers that are being given to me by the county or by the support to the county. I'm not buying it, and not when I talk to the author of the report who says those numbers are inaccurate. So what I'm asking is, it's clear to me that I don't want to stop this. I want it to be deferred until such time as we get clarity on how much things will really cost.
I would suspect that the information in this report is pretty accurate. I don't know why you would disagree with that. And if you have some specific information, did you want to speak to it, our Director of Public Works, please?
Thanks. I want to let you know that I did speak to Mr. Burns as well this afternoon. But when you do, this is sort of my experience as a consultant coming through. When you go through a draft plan, the developer will hire an engineer to look at all the aspects. So when this was developed, my expectation is that Steve looked at servicing by gravity sewer, looked at servicing by private. And I would gather if gravity had come up more cost effective, we would probably have twice as many lots to make it affordable. When they came back, he said to his client, the best way economically to develop this is to see if the town will let you do it on septic. In order to do that, we have to meet the guidelines for the nitrate loading, so they have to prove that it will not harm the environment on the way out if they're going to do private septic. When Mr. Burns talked to you about this sanitary pumping station, he said it was an outdoor generator, which we would not allow because it's in a residential area. Noise complaints are way too high. It would have no building. It would have outside controls, which we don't allow anymore because of the 3 in Southampton that give us headaches all summer long. The heat on those control panels overheats the instrumentation, and it also didn't include any dewatering. Now, the dewatering on this site is extensive because the lake is that high. 3 meters below ground is a minimum where you would start with a wet well for a pumping station, and that is where the groundwater is. So you're at least $250,000 on top of that $400,000 just to dewater the site. When you start adding the things into the site conditions, then I am in agreement with the $900,000 price tag that would be servicing this by a pumping station, which is why we looked at it and said, we defer the requirement to put a pumping station in today for this development, and that will allow us 40 lots instead of 80, which we thought was a better fit for the area, on the condition that in the subdivision agreement, they agreed to a condition that said the purchasers of these lands would have to know that when a sewer was available, they would have to connect. So what that means is in 10 or 20 years, when the rest of the neighborhood develops and we put a pumping station in, then these people will be required to connect by gravity. That was why. So all that work has been done by professionals. It has been reviewed internally by town staff. And we are in agreement with the work that's been done to get us to this point. I think what you're asking for is potentially a peer review by BM Ross of that work. That might be an appropriate thing. It still will be the $10,000 to $15,000 that as an update to the master plan. Our master plan will also be updated every 5 years. So it's a 2014 report. So in 2019, we'll be looking at it again to make sure that it is on board. And when new developments come in, they'll be put into the math. But this area we put into the math to make sure that concessions will be able to be handled as it already has been.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Question, Mr. Mayor, to Amanda through you. What about the grinder pump?
So a grinder pump is about $2,500. So that would get the sewage out of the house, but then you still need to construct the infrastructure in the road to concession 10. And I'm not sure the size of the horsepower pump that you would need in each house to get it up that 10 feet in that distance. It's a half a kilometer. It's a lot of head to overcome.
With respect, Mr. Burns said it could be done.
Anything can be done.
At $2,500 per home.
For the pump in the house.
It can be done.
Then there's the infrastructure in the street to get it to concession 10.
So isn't it, it's my opinion, isn't it your opinion that it would be better to put this community on sanitary sewers than to put a new 30-lot subdivision on septic system? You're okay with that?
I am okay with it. Yep, I'm okay with it. Like I said, the choice between 30 and 80 homes in this situation, I think this is the best overall development with the umbrella of all concerns, engineering and environment the SPCA had together. I think this is the best.
Thank you, Amanda. Any further questions? Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. Maybe just stay there for a second. On one of the maps that we received, you can actually see an extension of, I think it's called Street A on one place, but it's got a name on another. You can actually see an extension across the 10th concession into the lands in that direction. So I just want to confirm the urban settlement area line is out to the 10th, right? Already? Okay, so the next official plan review, the ideal situation would have been for the discussion then to bring this area into the settlement area and then go from that. Because I too see things getting really close to this, and I appreciate what you said, because I did have a question about, the agreement on title about the connecting. To me, it's these are oversized lots. They're going to sell likely at very nice prices, and to me, it's like, geez, $18,000 on top of everything else. Get the sewer line in there right now and take care of it, because, when you see the extension of the road on a drawing, something's coming within, and you said 10 to 20 years, and as long as it's there, that if the pipe goes by there, all of these properties have to connect. That's a good thing. But, to me, it's so close that it probably should happen now, but I appreciated your comments. Thank you.
Here's one clarification. This is in the settlement area. The subdivision is. Yeah.
Yes,
it goes. The settlement area comes down concession 10, but then it goes north to keep that the Miramichi Bay and all that development along there in the settlement area.
Okay, Councillor Mike Matt.
Mr. Mayor, are we dealing with the motion for, I still have some questions about the actual application, but, oh, good, so I can still ask, okay, thank you. These seem pretty, maybe pretty trivial compared to what we just discussed with connectivity of sewers. I had that question actually written down, but I think it's been well answered. Mine really, I agree with, I had written down tree canopy, the guarantee the minimum 30% or greater. And I heard from our planner that I'm not sure, but there's got to be more definitive answer about the maintaining of that tree canopy, because I had that question I wanted to ask. And do you want to revisit that again, or could you answer that again one more time for me?
I will, with your consent, Mr. Chair. I did get a tap on the shoulder that somebody has done that calculation and can confirm that there is 30% with the current tree planting retention plan.
Good. I'm pleased to hear that. And the other questions I had, and maybe through you, Mr. Mayor, to Jay, the planner, perhaps coordinator, it's just really two things. And maybe it's the Director of Public Works, but the trail connecting links, I see two in the plan, and this will come later, probably with site plan control. Will it, Mr. Mayor, or would it happen in terms of who's putting those two trail linkages in, and at whose expense? I'm hoping the developer will be connecting two nice trail linkages to our existing trail system. So is that true to Jay? Can
I think that will be part. That's a recommend. Well, you can go ahead, Jay, but that's a recommendation that will be part of the subdivision agreement and the developer's responsibility.
So he will be constructing at his expense. Okay. Thanks, Jay. My other question was, in Miramichi Estates, no sidewalks. Pegasus Trails, no sidewalks. Mystic Cove, yes to sidewalks, and then the Leslie development later on tonight, yes to sidewalks. Is there, we maybe through you, Mr. Mayor, to maybe Director of Public Works or Jay again, but where are we at with policy around sidewalks in these developments, or no sidewalks? And I know the safety from the safety aspect, I get it, but why no to those two other developments? And all of a sudden now we're asking for sidewalks in these two applications this evening. Is it kind of the flavor of the day, or where are we coming from with sidewalks?
Well, I certainly wouldn't characterize it as flavor of the day, Mr. Mayor, sorry. It's that we try to get better with each development. And I know this landowner, this developer has regretted not installing sidewalks in his previous developments and recognizes the value that they provide for connectivity and safe use of the road infrastructure throughout town. So through the Director of Public Works and the senior management team, we are updating our sidewalk policy, and we internally right now are in discussions to expand on our current OP policy, which is that a sidewalk could be put on in every street in Saugeen Shores, and that the particular construction standard of those sidewalks may change from subdivision to subdivision, but that is our goal, and that the goal is to get better with each development.
Councillor Grace.
Mr. Mayor, I do have a follow-up question from roads then, I guess this would be a question for Jay based on our official plan, or maybe Amanda. Would this road in this subdivision be classified as a local road? Okay, so our OP, our official plan, section 4.3.4.1, says local roads generally carry light volumes of traffic at low speed and provide direct access to abutting land uses. Local roads shall be designed to discourage through traffic. The minimum right-of-way width for local roads shall be 20 meters. I think I probably know the answer to this, but could you tell me what the proposed width of the actual roadway is? Somebody? Okay. So I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but if we are trying to make our developments, if we're trying to improve with every development, studies show that the safest lane width is 3 meters, not 4.25. That once you get over 10 feet or 3 meters, speed increases, and so do accidents. So I'm wondering what the possibility might be of decreasing the actual road width of this development.
Generally, the wider paved portion of the road also provides for on-street parking. And in most developments, there is consideration for that, so it does require somewhat wider than the 3 meter. 3 meter is only large enough for a vehicle. It doesn't provide for any parking.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Vice Deputy Mayor Hubert.
I just wanted to ask, I believe it was in the report we saw the last time, but the report tonight didn't include specific reference to who did the archaeology study. Could we just have the name of that firm again, please?
I think it was AMEC, wasn't it? AMEC? I did see it.
Councillor Grace knows the answer.
It's Scarlett Januas, I think.
Oh, she did this one too?
Oh, maybe not, sorry. I saw her name twice.
It's on the other two.
The firm is called Archaeologists, Inc. And the individual, the licensed individual's name is Keith Powers.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? I guess we're ready for the question then. Back to it. Do you want me to read the recommendation again? Everybody understand the recommendation? I think it's pretty straightforward. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda then is, again, it's another recommendation in a report. It's by Donald and William Leslie for its zoning bylaw and zoning bylaw and a draft plan of subdivision. It's for on the Shore Road, and I'll ask our planner to present the report.
Okay, the proposed subdivision by Leslie is a 15-lot plan of subdivision. It is in the north end of the primary urban settlement of Saugeen Shores. The development is bordered by the Shore Road on the west and Oak Street on the north. The consultant for the Mr. Leslie is here tonight as well if you have any questions about specifics of the development. The land use policies were considered, comments were received from the town, agencies and the public on the application, and I'll speak to some of those as we go. We received a complete application for the development, which included a draft planning report from Ron Davidson, planning consultants, dated May 2017, functional servicing and stormwater management report, dated May 2017 from Darrell Robbins, consulting, natural heritage impact study from Aquatic and Wildlife Services, January 2015, and a stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment from AMEC Consultants, dated March 2017. The application was circulated to the town and other agencies, as well as to the public. The comments from the town were related to a number of matters which have been dealt with now through sort of massaging of the plan and so on and so forth, and provided us with some draft conditions of approval, which I'll speak to in a few minutes. The two issues of contention, I guess, that I'll say that the committee should be aware of is that one, the removal of the EP from the front or side lot lines, and this was something that was proposed to sort of, I guess, clean up the proposed zoning somewhat, to remove the EP zones from the front and or sides of the lots, and that was considered, and we have looked at that and continue to feel that there is something to be gained from the EP zones recommended in the information report last month. Those are related to, I guess, visibility. In the proposed development, and I'm not sure if I have a map here that I can actually speak to. Okay, so in this zoning amendment map or schedule, there are EP zones across the front of the lots bordering along Shore Road and along the interior road that's to be constructed. These EP zones will show up in zoning bylaws associated with the development. It will show up in the county mapping if and when the application is approved, and it will sort of stand as a permanent reminder to the individuals living there as well as to individuals living around it that the intent of this development was to preserve trees along Shore Road and the new road to be constructed, and that those borders, if you want to call them, or along the Shore Road and the new road, were intended to provide some buffering to the interior or the larger portion of woodlands and wet area that is on the eastern side of this block. The idea behind it was that those buffered areas would slow down the wind. It would provide some connections to the area in the interior and so on for future protection of the interior significant woodlands on the east part of the block. While this could be accommodated through the subdivision agreement and other things, it becomes invisible over time to the property owners on the properties and the neighbors. In most situations, the instruments that are attached to deeds are not visible to the owners unless they specifically request them. I have purchased 3 properties in my life, and not once was I provided with those instruments until I asked for them. It's assumed that no one knows what they're for, cares about them, and so it's not a very effective way of ensuring that owners are aware of those things on the property, whereas the zoning does. So we continue to recommend that there be an EP zone across the front of the properties where indicated. What we have looked at, though, in reviewing it is to simplify this by creating one EP zone to address the buffer strips across the front of the properties rather than 2. There's no reason that we're aware of that the developer can't comply. They have sufficient depth in the lots and so on, so that they can maintain those buffer strips at the proposed width as shown in the drawing, without having a sort of a 2-stage environmental protection zone at the front. Going along further through the, and maybe I should back up a little bit here just to make sure that nothing's been missed. So we did circulate to agencies. The comments coming back from the town were related to the environmental strips, which I've talked about. They also provided some conditions of approval, which we have addressed and I'll speak to shortly. Public consultation, there were concerns raised at the information session with regard to the development, the width of the road, the internal road that is to be built, and so on. I think we've some talked through some of the roadway issues and so on, that it is the town's standard that the road allowance be 20 meters wide, and again it's an 8.5 meter paved portion, and that allows for on-street parking in the development, so that it needn't spill out into the Shore Road or other adjacent roads to provide that on-street parking when there are visitors coming to the new lots. There was one other issue, and that was related to a single lot that lies at the northeast corner at the right-hand side of the screen. There's a large lot there, and there was a suggestion that perhaps the zoning should be R3. It seems that there is sufficient area on the land for more than a single detached dwelling, and so we have tried to address that request by suggesting an R2, which would provide for a semi or a single at that location. We're not certain that a row dwelling could fit in the area because of the nearness of the EP zone and especially in this southwestern corner of that proposed lot. But it could potentially be an R2, which would provide for a single or a semi if the developer chose to develop the lot in that manner. Going to the conditions of draft approval, there was a concern from the developer related to the sidewalk conditions, proposed conditions, and the subdivision agreement, and that related to the ambiguous nature of one of the conditions that was in there that did not inform the developer of enough in their view of what the intent was or what the lands or improvements would be used for. And so if I can draw your attention then to, and it's not going to be on the screen I don't think, but it's on page 3 of the report, the applicant's concern over wording of draft plan conditions. In the sidewalk condition, the first two deal with sidewalks shall be installed on one side of local streets in a location and standard approved by the town of Saugeen Shores. I don't think the developer has any issue with that, and the streets that would abut the development would be fair game, I guess. Sidewalks shall be installed on both sides of collector roads in a location and standard approved by the town of Saugeen Shores. So in the situation where there are collector roads there, then that would apply. The third condition, C, sidewalks shall be installed external to the plan of subdivision where required by the town, is ambiguous, and it leaves the developer unsure of what that requirement will entail, and they would like to see that removed. Similarly, the subdivision agreement speaks to that the owner enter into an agreement with the town of Saugeen Shores to satisfy all the requirements of the town of Saugeen Shores, and including matters required in these conditions of approval, and may also include the following to the satisfaction of the town: the contribution to or the making of any required off-site improvements. And again, it's left up to anyone's imagination to understand what that is, and so they consider that to be not well enough defined in their mind so that they can properly understand the cost of those additional improvements if they're imposed, or what those improvements might be for. So the last statement, statement C and statement I in the two sections there of the proposed conditions for draft approval, the planning department is recommending that those be removed, and that it seems that the intent is satisfied by the other conditions that remain in those in the draft conditions that are attached to the report. There were some concerns about traffic impacts on the Shore Road and so on and so forth. This can be addressed if necessary through the subdivision agreement. The external road improvements that might be required, it would be helpful if those were discussed in advance with the developers so they understand fully what their requirements might be for the subdivision. So at this point in time, there is consideration or recommendation being made by the planning department that the zoning on that single lot in the northeast corner could become an R2 zone, which would provide for one additional dwelling unit there, and that the EP zone be reduced to one EP zone at the front of those lots to simplify that, but still provide a visible connection between the tree retention at the front of the lot and going into the future. Either way, if it's in the subdivision agreement or if it's in zoning, really doesn't change the onus upon the municipality to address any issues related to tree removal that are not in keeping with the subdivision agreement or the zone. So there, in our mind at least, there really is very little difference with regard to the municipality's duty when and if complaints come forward with regard to tree removal on the property. The conditions of draft approval are attached to the report, and as I mentioned on the screen there, you have the proposed zoning amendment with the simplified EP zone, and our recommendation is that the zoning on the property be approved with the modification to an R2 on that northeast lot, lot 15, and that the draft plan of subdivision with the modified conditions of approval that are indicated in the conditions approval, and that would be condition number 9, that C would be removed and left simply as A and B, and also condition 16 be approved without the sub-I related to contributions that are undefined at present in the subdivision agreement, condition 16. And that would be that the condition be adopted as revised.
Okay, thanks, Bruce. I'll read the recommendation, then we'll have some questions and comments. The recommendation is that the zoning bylaw amendment Z-52-17.48 be approved as modified with R2 zoning on proposed lot 15 and with EP special zoning along the front sides of the lots as shown on the draft bylaw, and that Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores approve the draft bylaw as attached. And further, that the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores recommend to the County of Bruce Approval Authority that the proposed draft plan of subdivision 41T-2017.03.48 be approved as modified by the Planning Department in accordance with the draft conditions as attached. Councillor Mike Maya.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I do concur with the EPA and EPB being combined to one EP zone. I do agree with that. I won't be supporting the motion based on one statement in there, and that's the lot 15, residential second density R2. I clearly remember Mr. Davidson being in front of this council a few months back, dealing with another development in that vicinity, and talking about higher density, and it was met with non-approval. And that and the recommendation was changed to not permit higher density. And R2 certainly allows a semi or a duplex setting out there for. And I recall I'm just wondering for creating in a little bit of a different manner, but another Market Street where the character of the neighborhood is being impacted with allowing a semi to be put in that area. So I won't be supporting the recommendation based on that one statement about R2. Because I really believe it should have an R1 designation on it for single-family dwelling. And I think that the owners, if I'm not mistaken, right back early in the process, I believe that the owners asked for R1 designation on that property. So I agree with the owners. And I'm basing my thoughts on earlier discussions that we had in this very same council chambers
Councilor Rich.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Last time when we had the information report come forward, or the public meeting come forward, Brian Cleaver spoke to it, so I went down and I walked the property with him. And one of the things that immediately stuck out was that EP designation that surrounds those properties is not really in keeping with the rest of that neighborhood. The rest of that neighborhood has, especially the newer homes, has big front yards with a lot of curb appeal. And the majority of that EP designation is small, scrubby type trees. I would like to see that part removed so that the new homes in the neighborhood would have an opportunity to be in keeping with the other new homes that are being built. The other concern that I have heard from residents in that area is overdensity through the R1 designation, and as well, they were trying to talk about keeping that as much tree cover as possible. In the last presentation, we talked about keeping 30% tree cover. I haven't heard any reference at all to how much of tree cover is kept in this designation. So I'd like to see that kind of addressed first and foremost. I'd like to see the R2 down to an R1, and I'd like to see the EP surrounding move so that they're bigger lots and more in keeping with the newer homes in that area.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the comments of my colleagues about the R1, R2. I think that lot should be an R1 zone. My questions around are around the EP 31 zone. First, what is the width of that zone? How big is it?
I believe it was drawn now so that it included both the 4.5 and the 1.5 meter that was previously proposed to provide that buffer.
So that's one thing that people are going to need to know, right? It's just a line. It's just a random line on a map. Now it has to be in the zoning wording. If it's going to be in there, it has to be written in so they know where it is. And then what exactly is development or site alteration? I mean, in the bylaw it says that no development or site alteration shall be permitted. What is that?
Development is typically buildings, development of buildings and so on. Site alteration would include grading, tree removal, paving, things like that don't necessarily involve structures.
Yeah, I think that it would need to be said precisely what you can and cannot do in there. If we're all we've been talking about is tree removal, why can't we just say you can't take trees down unless they're dead? Why do we have to put this language in here that is confusing? Because if you in the Conservation Authority, development means something totally different than what you just delineated there, right? It could mean, in life could mean digging a hole, for heaven's sakes, right? We don't know. These words are meaningless. So we need to say exactly what exactly you can do in this area. If we're going to be clear if we're going to put this in place, and I think it's not entirely clear whether it makes sense, although your argument, I think, Bruce, is reasonably strong, that it's there, it's on paper, people can see it, right? That's clear. I like clarity. That's good. So let's make it real clear that says, first off, it's 6 meters wide in your front yard, and here's precisely what you can do. I would say this development site alteration language should come out, and it should just say you can't cut the trees down unless they're dead or dying. You can fancy it up a little bit, but that's effectively what it should say, because that's what we mean, and we should just say what we mean so it's clear. And so I don't like that language. I don't support the bylaw as written for that reason, and I don't support the change to from the R1 to the R2 zone. So, I mean, those changes I would like to see, although I do believe that I could, if the clarity was put in the bylaw, I believe that I could support having I could support the existence of the EP 31 zone. I think that that clarity could be valuable. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Vice Deputy Hubert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of different categories, but I'll just echo the support for no R2 zone to have that remain as an R1 zone as we saw originally. I did have a question and then a comment. When we did the major sewer work through this area, there were incredible challenges on the Shore Road to get it to be the right width. I just was curious, and my eyes couldn't help me when I did a drive there the other day. The width of the Shore Road here, what is it? What is the width of the Shore Road that would be in front of some of these properties? Because we had a hard time getting proper widths through there.
It varies on different streets. I do know, Diane, that it varies on Eckford and I forget that. It varies. It's not. Okay, it's not uniform throughout the subdivision, throughout the North Shore. Sorry.
Where I was going with that is, we're talking about the extension of a road here, and depending upon how two of the properties front, because one could front on Oak Street, one could front on the existing Deer Run. So you basically have 5 lots in there that potentially front on this road. That to me is more equivalent to a lane sort of situation. So I'm just curious to know why we would look for that big wide standard in there. I get about the parking thing, but this is certainly, it's not a connector road to anywhere. It's because it's easier just to go down to the corner to get to the Shore Road than to make this little hump. So I'm curious about that. Why it would have to be the standard width when basically it's 5 properties perhaps that are fronting onto it. I did want to comment though on the sidewalk situation. I think it's rather silly to require sidewalks on this tiny little stretch when we had a chance to put sidewalks all over the place out here and we chose not to do it. We only put sidewalks in a couple of locations when we did our big project. I would rather us try and be more creative, and I think it's good that developers get asked to contribute towards this sort of thing, but rather than install a sidewalk here, could we not be creative and get some funding and extend some of the other pieces of sidewalk that exist to bring them closer, rather than have a little chunk of it in the middle of an area where there's not a sidewalk anywhere near here to connect to it. So, my fourth comment was related to the conservancy part. It's not indicated, there's a comment in there about, transferring land to a conservancy. I would hope that the town would be aggressive in wanting that property and going after that property. It is a rather strategic location for some interesting parkland situations. Totally not developed, but I just would, I don't know when the place in the conversation comes for us to hear about that, but there's a big part of this development project that is going to sit as natural as it is right now. And I would very much like the town to be incredibly interested in getting our hands on that for public property. But I did, the sidewalk thing, I don't understand why we would require a sidewalk to be here when it's not connecting with anything. The closest sidewalk to this is further up Turner. I think, as you come down Ottawa Street, you'd be on a sidewalk there, which, that's the closest one. So to me, that doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
I just to comment to your comments about that Block A or that conservancy, I think what it says in the report that the owner will retain ownership unless the town or another body agrees to take ownership. So I think that's an option, still an option that we can pursue if that's the case. And I don't know, okay, I'll go to you, Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also will not support this as written. With regard to the R2 designation, which means that there could be a duplex or semi-detached, not just an additional dwelling. It would be an additional dwelling, but it could be in that form. And as there are no other semi-detached or duplexes in the area, I think it would be a mismatch for this neighborhood. In our October meeting, when this suggestion was raised, Mr. Davidson, who's the planning consultant, responded The owner doesn't want to do that. It doesn't meet the character of this neighborhood. And he also talked about the fact that the applicants were sensitive to the negative reactions to a proposed development which was similar to this in late 2016. So related to this too, it's my understanding that the neighbors were not specifically notified about the proposed modification from R1 to R2. And I think that we need to make sure that that happens, even if there's not a legal requirement. Our planning documents say that the average R1 density in our town is 7 to 11 units per hectare. This development, I think, would be 12.8, which would be exceeding our average R1 density. Even though the recommendation from our official plan says the ideal minimum would be 15. But it also says that the minimum and maximum densities will be permitted. It doesn't say that they are mandated. And it also says, our official plan also says that council should be satisfied that the density of the development is appropriate for the area. And R1, in my opinion, is appropriate. R2 is not. Thank you.
Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just briefly, I'm just a little bit confused. I'm also in agreement with the R1 versus R2. I think it should be an R1, but I'm a little bit confused as to, with this EP strip across the front of these lots, are we creating a situation where these houses or the properties that are going to be built behind these trees are not going to be visible from the road? Is that what the intent is, to shroud the properties? Because to me, if you're maintaining property standards, the reason that people keep their houses looking nice, the reason people put up Christmas lights in the Christmas time, and the reason that people landscape their properties is so they look nice from the road. That's why they call it curb appeal, so that you can see the house from the curb. Are creating a situation where these dwellings behind here are all going to be hidden by a row of cedar trees, I guess? And if so, what is the purpose of that? I really don't understand that. Is it to try and maintain the current look, which is a forest canopy for the people living across the road? Or is it to hide something? Or, like, personally, if there was a stipulation that you had to have a 1.5 meter strip of cedars in front of my house, I'm not sure that I would want to buy a property in that neighborhood. So if somebody can explain to me what the purpose of that is, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, the tree retention strip, or the EP across the front of the properties, was recommended as part of the environmental impact study, and that was for protection of that woodland area on the east end of the property. So the purpose of the tree retention was to provide essentially a windbreak, in simple terms, I think, for that interior woodland, area, so that there wouldn't be blowdown of trees and various things like that. And we know, or at least it's been indicated in a number of environmental impact studies and so on that have been prepared for development, that wind velocity has an effect on the species and the makeup of all kinds of things, from insects to small birds and animals, that can survive in the wooded area. So right now there are plenty of trees offering buffer to those wooded areas on the property, and the intent and the findings of the environmental impact study suggest that there is some form of buffering, windbreak, whatever you want to call it, that should be provided for those wooded areas that remain in the development. With regard to the tree retention and so on and so forth, basically the entire block there that isn't in residential development right now will be retained. And I can't say with certainty, but it looks like about 40% to me. And that doesn't include the strips along the front of the lots, or there are a couple of other areas in the plan that have been provided for wooded areas, that are drainage type features and so on, and blocks in that development. So the tree retention is, I would think, above 40% overall in that development. The EP strips along the front of those lots was not intended to obscure the development behind them or anything. It's to provide a buffer to the remaining woodlands that are left in the area. And if I may, I'd like to point out that the width of the interior street, while the road allowance is required to be 20 meters in width, it would be up to the municipality or the town to decide what type of road is appropriate through that development. And if a standard of some sort, whether it be cottage road or some other standard, could possibly be applied there. Regarding sidewalks, it's a very sore point for me, I think. I live in a development right now with no sidewalks, and there's a young lady who lives on that street that relies on an electric wheelchair to get around. And in the wintertime, I really fear for her life because people can't see as well with the snowbanks, and she is zooming along in her electric wheelchair in the middle of the road, not quite, but to the side of one road, and it's not a safe condition for her. And I really feel fairly strongly that sidewalks should be provided in all development, at least on one side of the road. To come back a little bit to the EP, in the current zone, there is some provision for clearing at the front of those lots, up to 30% of the width. That's in the bylaw currently. We could, without too much difficulty, I suppose, although it doesn't translate well onto other mapping, but we could provide a dimension for that strip along the front that would help to resolve the uncertainty. And we could probably make reference to the depth of that across the front in the bylaw. And finally, the R2 zone can be removed with the stroke of a pen in the part 1 of the bylaw. And needn't be reason for deferral or anything else. I think that that could easily be done. We recommended the R2 to address a concern or an issue that had been raised at the information reading only.
Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, that's interesting. Stroke of the pen. And that's the way our planning department feels about things. And it wasn't that...
You don't know what he feels about it. Don't make a personal accusation. If
I
you
heard
got
him say...
He didn't tell him what he felt about it, Neil, and I'm not going to argue with you. If you've got an issue, speak to the issue.
I will speak to the issue. So, we heard recently, just a few minutes ago, one of our staff members, the engineer, Amanda, spoke to the fact that certain things should be done, and everybody was in agreement except me. And for those reasons. And now, she advocates for all new plan developments to be completed to the full urban standard, which includes sidewalks. And members of this council want to go against that staff recommendation, which is interesting enough. And then we have an R2 designation in a vacant piece of property that is being developed, which meets the official plan, the provincial policy statement, the Bruce County official plan, and the Saugeen Shores official plan. It meets all of those criteria, and our planners listened to the recommendation, or at least a query, as to why it couldn't be R2, to make sure we met density requirements, and we thumb our nose at it. One day we say yes, the next day we say no. Where are we with our official plans and the way we're supposed to do business? I really feel that we're in the wind here, and I apologize if you don't like that, but that's how I feel about it.
Well, we haven't dealt with the recommendation yet, so we don't know whether it's going to have subdivisions or R2 or anything. We're really discussing it now, and we appreciate your comments. Councillor Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for allowing me to come back a second time and speak to this. And our Vice Deputy Mayor, she triggered a thought with me, and I think it has merit, and staff probably won't be happy with what I'm about to say, but I asked the question earlier about sidewalks and a couple subdivision, developments and sidewalks, not in another couple, and was it the flavor of the day? And Jay's answer was no, it's not the flavor of the day. We're trying to bring, I think, urban standards to some of these new developments. But a question I have is 15-unit housing development and sidewalks, internal, external, going to nowhere. I'm not sure where they head. I agree with that statement. I'm not sure whether it's $25,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 what it costs to build those sidewalks, but wouldn't that $100,000 look good in a trails reserve to establish trails in the future, acquire some lands to the I believe it's south of the property, if I've got my directions right. Wouldn't it be appealing to think that we take that sidewalk money and we reallocate those funds into reserve for future trail development? And I think that people can step out their front door and they can get to trail maybe 4 doors down and walk through a nice trail around some pond areas and have a picnic and maybe spend their money a little more wisely from a trail development standpoint. You triggered so when Vice Deputy Mayor comment, where does it go? I'm not certain that 15-unit housing development begs sidewalks, Mr. Mayor. And I think our money could be better spent. And I'm wondering if there's any appetite around the council table for that kind of discussion with the owner, but through staff. But I just think it has some appeal to me. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It occurred to me I had another question. I will just make one comment about that, about the sidewalk thing, and just to bear in mind that sidewalk development rarely happens contiguously. Often we build sidewalks in certain places, and at the time they don't connect anything, but eventually they do. We build them bit by bit over time, over a long time, often, and eventually we build a sidewalk network, and that's how it's played out over a long time, and could play out that way in this case, I think. But on the question I had, and was there's a strange bit of disagreement in this planning report, unusual, I guess, maybe not strange, but unusual, between the planning department and municipal staff around, I guess I don't know if there's still disagreement, I guess that's what I'm trying to assess, around this question of the requirements for sidewalk, but outside the development, or these covenants that are the planning department is proposing to change from what we saw before, and removing some what the planning department is calling ambiguity. And I just want to make sure before the town of Saugeen Shores makes a recommendation to the county on this, that municipal staff is content with that the town of Saugeen Shores has the covenants in place that we require from our perspective to do what we need to do around this development. Are we content with the planning department's recommendation on that point? Or are you?
I'll be specific to that point and know that we have been in communication with the developer to work to advise the developer on what their responsibilities are. And so when we drafted our original recommendations to the county, they weren't part of those discussions with the developer. So I think we've come to terms with the developer where the sidewalk should be located. And if the condition is to be worded the way the county recommends, I still think we can proceed with the developer to get the sidewalks installed where we think they're appropriate. But we're not objecting to the conditions because we're used to dealing with general conditions from time to time and just in good faith working with the developer. So I think we can continue to do that. We would prefer it a different way, but we're upfront with the developer, and the developer knows what the requirements are.
So I guess the recommendation, and we've got some suggested changes to it. And you want to speak? Oh, you've got a motion.
I'd like to propose an amendment to the proposed bylaw. Bylaw. Are we dealing with the bylaw yet? I'd like to change the content of the bylaw proposed. I don't know.
Go ahead.
It's a question perhaps for Jay. ultimately, at some point, if this proceeds, there's some sort of site plan or site plan control. Who controls that? Does the town of Saugeen Shores?
Well, it depends on which issue is being addressed, but in the recommendations, if it's sidewalks, for example, it'll be the town's responsibility to review and approve any of the engineered drawings and ultimately integrated in the subdivision agreement, as an example. Width of the road will be the same. Town's responsible for approving that, and ultimately council in their subdivision agreement. Be clear, it's not site plan, it's the subdivision agreement, yeah.
Just trying to make sure we can move forward with this. We've got three issues. One, and I guess we can deal with this one. This is an amendment, and we deal with this amendment first. We can deal with this first. Okay, this first amendment is moved by the Deputy Mayor and seconded by Councillor Rich, that Section 22.4.31I of the proposed bylaw be amended to read as follows. Trees shall not be removed unless they are dead or dying. Okay, any discussion on this? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. So we've got three other issues, I think. One, and I think probably we'll deal with them individually or perhaps. The first one would be this Block 15 where it was suggested in the recommendation that, let me see it here. Be as modified with R2 zoning on lot 15, and I think is there consensus to have that removed to R1, so I can have a mover and a seconder to remove that. Moved by Councillor Mike Mead and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Sorry. So is there any discussion, further discussion on this? So this will amend the recommendation to remove the R2 requirements on lot 15. Any discussion on this? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So I guess the one other is the EP's. Well, no, I think you volunteered that, and I guess in the EP zone you'll provide the depth for it. Okay, we can do that. So I don't think we need that. That's good. Yeah. The last one, I guess, then is the sidewalks, and it's in the draft. We can deal with that, I think, as an intent now because it'll be part of the subdivision agreement. But so as the recommendation is that you will include sidewalks and perhaps a connecting link as negotiated by the town. Yes, I just want to make sure I'm encapsulating that correctly and not what's in there. Okay. Okay then. So are we ready on that issue? Councillor Dave Mead.
Just quickly, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On sidewalks, are we talking about sidewalks on both sides of that street or just one sidewalk?
Just one.
One. Okay, good.
Whether we include sidewalks as as in the recommendation. So what it means they're in and yes, we do. You include them, yes. Okay. So go ahead.
We're dealing with the entire resolution right now. We're just dealing with the question of sidewalks right now.
Yes. Everybody clear on what we're doing here? Nobody's clear. There'll be one, yeah, which side? I think that'll be part of the recommendation, but the recommendation that you include them in the subdivision. Vice Deputy Huber.
Okay, are we talking about just the new road? We're not talking about Shore Road getting a sidewalk. Could we not somehow?
Okay, I guess here's maybe clarify this. I'll read it. The question is, can we accept the planning condition number 9, which states sidewalks shall be installed on one side of the local streets in a location and standard approved by the town of Saugeen Shores, on both sides of the collector roads in a location standard approved by the town of Saugeen Shores. So there is no collector roads there, so we're really dealing with 9A. So it'll be on one side of the street. you want to speak to it, Amanda, please?
So what we've been working with the developer is we will have them put sidewalk on the new street, on part of Oak Street, and then Shore Road. So across the frontage of the new lots, except for the one on its own, they'll have new sidewalk. And the intent with that is it will connect to a sidewalk network at one point. So along North Shore, those lots will get sidewalk, connecting to the new street, and then the new street will have sidewalk. But we're not asking for sidewalk on Deer Run Court because of the topography and the ditch and that what is there today. So this is Oak Street here. Go across the frontage on Oak Street.
Mr. Mayor, I know that, or I believe that staff is intending to bring a transportation master plan as part of our budget for this year, which I thought was going to be addressing issues like sidewalks on roads and where they would be most appropriately placed. And I'd like to see that discussion and study before we add new sidewalks on, which I believe would make changes to the character of this neighborhood.
I think in keeping with this is as part of our standard subdivision agreement that we ask of all subdivisions. So I mean, it's. But Councillor,
Mr. Mayor, help me understand why you've pulled that out. If it's inside what they're already asking for, what is the difference? Why has it been pulled out separately?
There was some discussion about whether there was ever going to be sidewalks in here, and that's what I'm trying to ascertain. So there was some councillors yes, some councillors no. I think the way to deal with it is ask the question of the entire committee. Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I didn't get a chance to finish my comment, but it was, are we not able to perhaps include something that addresses the value of the sidewalks and then enable some potential creativity with the use of the funds? The reason why I say that is because Councillor Grace, I agree with her, a sidewalk on the Shore Road will definitely change that neighborhood, change the character. And you know, we were the ones who just, not within, well, it was about 6-7 years ago, we redid that whole stretch and we didn't put any sidewalks in there. So I would be curious to know how soon we would get linkages that would connect. So is there the potential just to set the wheels in motion for some additional creativity on this element?
Yeah, that's right. I think we're limited by the Planning Act about what we can ask or demand of developers, so we can't. And I suspect I'm not an expert on that. Here's our planning expert.
As expert as question. Though we already do this, and we have done it before. The Vice Deputy Mayor's seeking for creativity and innovation. We've done this in the past where we've worked with the developer when a sidewalk was not warranted in equity or for cases of equity. We made sure we got enough cash to support connections in the area if they were required, so that the developer's responsibility stayed the same because it was the same cost whether it was a sidewalk or whether it was cash. And we're working again with the developer on some of those issues.
Mitch.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my question's for Amanda. So the new standard moving forward is there will be sidewalks in front of subdivisions that we build in the future.
That's correct. That's what the official plan says, so that's what we're moving forward with.
So just hang on. So I guess the question now is we've had the suggestion modified yet again. So the question is, do you accept the recommendation as in the report, I guess, which will mean sidewalks on, as described by our Director of Community or Public Works? We're going to, yeah? So is everybody clear on what we're asking the question here? This is not finalized either. This will come back for another approval, so, and signing. This is a recommendation. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. So, the final one then is that's it, I guess. The main recommendation as amended. So we have, you have the amendments. So is there any further questions on the main motion then, or main recommendation? That zoning bylaw amendment Z 52-17.48 be approved as modified with R2 zoning, which that has been amended out on lot 15. EP zoning along the front/sides of the lots as shown on the bylaw schedule, and the council of the town of Saugeen Shores approve the draft bylaw as attached, and that council of the town of Saugeen Shores recommend to the County of Bruce Approval Authority that the proposed draft plan of subdivision 41T-2017-03.48 be approved as modified by the planning department in accordance with the draft conditions as attached. And we have some amendments to that. So, Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Mr. Mayor, can we change the last two words of the first paragraph to as amended?
You read it all again now. Is those two words fine? So the last sentence will be, and that the council of the town of Saugeen Shores approves the draft bylaw as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carries. Thank you. So the next item on the agenda then is zoning bylaw amendment 61-17.48, 1531314 Ontario Incorporated for Cedar Court Motel, 243 Huron Street South. And I will ask our planner to present the report.
Okay, so I'll try to be quick because I'm sure everybody wants to go home. So this is for approval of the conversion of the Cedar Court Motel from its current use as a motel into apartment dwelling units. And so you got the location up there. So our purpose here is to provide a recommendation based on our consideration of the land use policy planning policies and the comments we have received. So we received a complete application, it's been circulated, it's gone through public consultation, and we had the public meeting a month ago, and yeah, now we're at the decision. So we're looking to rezone the subject lands in order to permit the conversion. So most of the changes at this to this proposal will be interior renovations to allow for these new units to be built within the current building envelope. So the zoning bylaw amendment seeks to change the zoning from residential first specialty R9 or R1-9 to residential third density special R3-9. So this would allow the conversion. So we've reviewed the relevant policies, and we have circulated this as well. There were no additional comments beyond what was discussed at the previous meeting from circulated agencies. There's no outstanding concerns. There were some new comments received by the public. So there's one neighboring property owner who supports the conversion in principle, but has some concerns regarding the current state of the property, tenure and sightlines, and they would like to see the removal of a trailer that's currently on the property and the erection of a fence or screen. The applicant has responded to these comments, and there's also another comment that we received just very recently, also in support of this application, that refutes kind of what was said in those other comments. So there's some disagreement over the current state of the property by neighboring property owners. There's one neighbor who believes it's generally untidy. The other property owners who back onto Cedar Court Motel acknowledged that they believe that the property is exceptionally maintained, the building grounds are kept updated, and the guests are always very respectful. They've never had any issues with the property. The property owner has also provided us with some comments saying that the trailer that's currently there is storing building materials for something that's going to be built in the spring, so we imagine that will be removed. And the storage shed is where things like recycling bins and that sort of thing are taken, and also acknowledges that there's only so much that can be done to hide the propane tank. It exists on the property, and it's going to be visible there. In terms of tenure, this application, in our opinion, is an improvement from short-term motel use to long-term residential use. We see that as adding value to the area. People who will live there care about the maintenance of the area and aren't just transient. It's more permanent, and so that we believe that tenure is more in line with the surrounding uses. So we believe that the comments from the neighbors have been addressed, and by our review and by the comments of the applicant, and we don't have any outstanding issues that we don't think could be resolved through site plan control of this application moving forward. The Conservation Authority has no outstanding objections. The town of Saugeen Shores has indicated that development charges may be collected for the change in demand because of the new zoning, and that the changes may also be subject to site plan control to ensure the adequate provisions of landscaping, amenity space, garbage maintenance, and all of that. So our recommendation is that the zoning bylaw amendment be approved and that council adopt the draft bylaw as prepared.
Thank you. Then I'll read the recommendation. We'll take any questions. The recommendation is further to the statutory public meeting held October the 16th, 2017, where the application was presented. No member of the public spoke to the application, and council members were provided an opportunity to ask questions for clarification. Therefore, staff recommend that the zoning bylaw amendments ed-61-17.48 be approved, and the council of the town of Saugeen Shores adopts the draft bylaw attached. Questions? Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
Thank you. I just would like clarification. Maybe I don't know if it comes from Art or Amanda since Jay isn't here, but the report says that the town may go after site plan control and we may collect development charges. I'd just like to know, will we have site plan control and will we collect development charges? Site plan control to me makes sense because if someone was just building an apartment unit, we would have a chance to deal with some landscaping and that sort of thing. So I think that would be appropriate here. But the development charges, the word may in there, I just was curious, would that apply here because with the conversion or not?
Did you hear that question through the door there, Jace?
I did. You're my superpowers. No one knows. Certainly, development charges are contingent on the number of units and the type of units they're converting to, and the amount of space that they're given credit for from the non-residential, and if they choose to stage it over time. So, and I guess there's so many variables. I keep saying and the time in which they do that because the DC bylaw gets updated from time to time. So at this point, we don't know the total conversion and number of units. We know after meeting with the owner recently that they're mostly one bedroom, so we know at least what column to look at and could work with the developer to come up with a net change. It might be maybe a negative, in which case he doesn't know any money, or maybe a positive, in which case some money is required to be paid.
The other question was around site plan control.
So site plan control, there's at the conversion an opportunity to look at fencing to address and mitigate some of the impacts, and some of the other issues that we'd identified, which I think was snow storage, garbage management, and I'm not sure if there was other issues that were identified during the discussion, but we can look at those as well.
I think the question is yes, it does apply, yes. Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So one I didn't think of before until right now, there'll be a whole bunch of address changes too. All those people will rent those spots, and they'll all be at the same address for postal and every other government agency, just like any other apartment?
I suspect it'll be addressing form as any apartment building. There's many
does that get
apartment.
looked after under site plan control or some other different?
Well, I suspect that's postal. Go ahead, Bart can answer that.
Part of the building permit process is that they'll have to actually have suite numbers and addresses.
Thank you. And so, I know you don't like this one, but this one, I understand garbage, but Blue Box Recycle. So this is a private enterprise. It was before, so they don't have to Blue Box. Is that the case?
Well, nobody has to Blue Box. It's voluntary. Everybody, the residential is paid for. Residential is collected, and if there is commercial, or I think I'm not even sure all what we do now. We used to collect commercial cardboard, and I think we stopped that. So it's really voluntary. But I suspect that they will. Most. Go ahead.
In the letter I received from the property owner, they do explicitly mention that the shed is being used to store recycle bins, and they take these out only on bin day because I'm quoting them directly because we try to recycle as much as possible here in Saugeen Shores, just like other businesses. So they're committed to that.
Councillor Dave Mayette, finally got you. Yeah, it's hard to miss you. You said.
I was wondering. Thank you. Finally, Mr. Mayor. My question is with regards to the construction of the building. A number of years ago, the requirements for hotels and motels were that they had to put up non-flammable barriers in the attic area that separated the suite so that fire can't jump along. And I wonder if those same requirements, or first of all, whether that upgrade had been done to this building and it meets the current motel standards, and going forward, when presumably they're going to take one or two or more suites, hotel suites, and convert them into a larger apartment building, whether that requirement is still required. And additionally, if it's an apartment, do you require a secondary egress and access point from
The fire code deals with existing structures, so I can't tell you if that building's got the fire separations in the attic space. The building code, when they go through a permit process, will have to address those type of issues as they move along through that process. So some of that stuff will come up through the architect, and he'll have to verify that that building meets minimum standards for a renovation. So they'll be addressed at that time.
Okay.
At this time, it's not known.
Okay, any further questions? All in favor? That's carried. So the last one now is a food truck report. And I guess Jay, our development coordinator, is going to present a report to us.
Well, I think I'll defer to others as well because this was a team effort, and as they all are, but this one in particular because of the type of request. I just want to set the context here at the beginning of the report that when we looked at other communities in Ontario and identified the three here as Waterloo, Owen Sound, and Kincardine, it was clear that they do encourage food trucks and those mobile food services in their downtowns. And so it's sort of with that sort of premise that in other communities, at least the ones we looked at, they are encouraging food truck activity in their downtowns. And so I want to keep that in mind, that sort of after we discussed and started discussing how this should proceed, we still felt ultimately that there is a way of making sure council could prohibit food trucks in the commercial core, while still also making sure that where exceptions could be built into the licensing bylaw, food trucks could be permitted, and I've outlined them here. And I just want to highlight really at the high level that I think that through the regulating, through the licensing, you could regulate how and in specific instances where in the downtown, right to block by block or property by property, how long they could operate, whether it was for an annual basis or a special event or any other time period. That there may be other opportunities like in Montreal where there's a very specific hub for food trucks, and you try to create a magnet for foodies or whatever, and so there could be other opportunities in the licensing And I keep emphasizing the licensing bylaw because I think it's more flexible and more responsive than the zoning bylaw. And so we offer two recommendations which staff provide that have the same effect. The first is to amend the zoning bylaw to prohibit food trucks except as outlined in the licensing bylaw. And part B of that option 1 is to update the licensing bylaw to regulate it as we want to. Or option 2 is we don't amend the bylaw at all and just update the licensing bylaw to regulate food trucks in the core areas, and that can be from blanket prohibition, which is not recommended, to the more specific matters that I've outlined. And so depending on the option that's supported either this evening or at another discussion, we'll prepare a bylaw and come back to council.
Any questions of Jay? Sorry. So, Vice Deputy Mayor Huber.
I might have a comment later, but I would appreciate, just, for future reference, I don't want us, don't report this to the press, Sandy, but I don't want us to have a downtown like Owen Sounds. So I would rather that you found some other jurisdictions that kind of are more in tune with where we think we're going and use those as examples. I don't doubt, what you did with Owen Sound, but Owen Sound's downtown is just so dismal. I would question any decision made about their downtown. So try and find us like a Port Perry or somewhere to use as a reflective model of maybe what would work here. Thanks.
Any further questions? Deputy Mayor Charbonneau.
Just make the comment, Mr. Mayor, that I agree with Jay's assessment and the assessment that's been gathered here that food trucks ought to be allowed in the downtown core areas. It's just a question of where is the key thing, and the scenario that we have permitted is this opportunity for them to be located on private property where they can build up in parking lots and stuff, which I think is contrary to all the other work we have done in terms of downtown improvement work. So I think that we have two options here, and staff has done a good job of giving us two options, which sort of get us to the same place. Either we allow with exceptions, or we prohibit with exceptions, which ultimately means it's allowed somewhere and not elsewhere. The key difference is how complicated do we make it to get to that place, and it's more complicated. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, but I think what you're driving at here is it's much more complicated to get there via the zoning bylaw than it is to get there via the regulation. And for me, the end result is the most important thing, and the end result is that food trucks be allowed on public lands, on streets, and during festivals and those things, but not permitted on private lands. And what I would ask you, Jay, is can we craft the licensing bylaw to prohibit the location of food trucks on private lands in the core commercial areas and allow them on public lands, given the context of the existing zoning bylaw? Is that something that we can craft while leaving the zoning bylaw the way it is?
Licensing bylaw can be constructed with other policy documents that the town has to support the brands that have been adopted by the community and in consultation with the business community. And where I think the zoning bylaw, if you use the word complicated, I guess as long as it's understood that complication means sort of potential complications, it's fairly straightforward on a document level to write a prohibition, but the complications arise because there opens the town up to potential appeal. Someone wants a food truck, they amend the zoning bylaw, they automatically have a right to appeal, whereas trying to amend the licensing bylaws is council control and they don't have a risk of an appeal on those issues.
Can I just clarify? But if I own a piece of property and I want to have a food truck on it, and the zoning bylaw says that I can, and the zoning bylaw right now is silent on the licensing bylaw, right? It doesn't say anything about the licensing bylaw right now. It just says I can have a food truck. And then I go to do it, and the town says, yes, it says that in the zoning bylaw, but no, you can't because of the licensing bylaw. Can't I appeal that decision of the towns and say the town is acting in violation of its zoning bylaw by prohibiting me from doing something that I'm allowed to do?
No, because there's no application from the landowner. The zoning bylaw is in effect. permits food trucks in the zoning bylaw, subject to meeting other applicable legislation, such as a licensing bylaw.
So it is subject to that by just, it doesn't have to be explicit about it, it's just subject to it by common law or whatever.
Well, it'd be, to me, I'll try to think of an analogy, but if I wanted to operate a hardware store on a property, it's zoned for it, but I don't have enough space to provide the parking, that doesn't mean I get to open the hardware store.
Okay. Okay, that's clear. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'm going to go over here. Who is John? Did you have a comment? Mike Myatt.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be supporting recommendation number 2. I just, I think what we are able, and I spoke to Jay about this today a little bit and asked some questions about licensing bylaw versus, zoning bylaw, and I think we can. I just think that the licensing bylaw provides a little more flexibility, and rather than create a prohibition and create some wording in our zoning bylaw that prohibits trucks, and then you have to, and then is there an appeal, and it's costly and timely, and we can change the, we can change our licensing bylaws as many times as we wish. And I take a look at Home Hardware in Southampton, for example, and they like to have a food truck. Well, is the wording too stringent in a zoning bylaw that prohibits that food truck from operating on their site? Or Walker House, for example, they've had trailed food trucks in the back, they're back in the back deck in the past. Is it prohibit that through the zoning bylaw? I think there's a lot more flexibility with option number 2 with the licensing bylaw, Mr. Mayor, and I think that's I think we'd be in a better position to go with number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I too was getting a little nervous there with what was being said, because existing is legal non-conforming if we change anything, right? If we change the zoning bylaw or we change a licensing bylaw, everywhere where there is one now is legal non-conforming. Is that a correct statement?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the business licensing bylaw, that each operation of their food truck has a limited, so they're licensed for the year, they're licensed for 6 months, so their license does expire.
Okay, so follow up to that. Thank you, Linda. So follow up to that. The one at Canadian Tire, which is only in South Saugeen Shores, we only have one Canadian Tire. It's practically become an institution. So it's not core commercial. We're only dealing with core commercial. Thank you.
If we went with option 2, when would we see the opportunity to update the business licensing bylaw? Would that follow very quickly behind this decision? Because I don't believe in all my terms on council we've ever updated the business licensing bylaw. I'd be wrong about that, but I think that I would be more in favor of something that enables food trucks on public property with licensing, rather than leaving it there that the zone enables it, because as the deputy mayor said, the zoning bylaw is silent on the licensing thing. So I would be curious to know how we could make it more obvious that just because it's in there, it still requires a second step, and you need to look at another document. I believe that what we did when we updated the zoning bylaw was we basically added in a definition of food trucks under the restaurant category to, I believe, to solve an issue with the highway commercial thing, which was the Canadian Tire situation. And there was one for one season anyway at the beer store in Southampton. However, we just put it in there as a restaurant definition, and then it flowed through to all of the other places in the zoning bylaw where restaurants were enabled. And I don't think it was really understood how that would play out. I believe that there's going to be an application for a food truck north of the bridge in Southampton in an area that's zoned recreational commercial. And, that wouldn't have been possible before, but it is now. So, I just, in the core commercial, I think there's a place for them. It's at a festival, it's at a special event or whatever, but just as a, putting it out there that this property is zoned okay for this, without something there that's very specific that says, but you got to get a license? How do we make sure people know that? And then how fast would we see the zoning or the update to the business licensing bylaw so that we could get that through before the next season? Thank you.
I can answer only one part. I'll have to defer on the other one. Is that the zoning bylaw already requires that nothing in the bylaw shall exempt any person from complying or obtaining any license permission of the corporation unless specifically authorized. So it goes for any requirement of the town. They still have to comply with those. And so the issue is communication, is how well does the town make sure that the potential proponents know the requirements of the town. So we could do better at that. We could update our website and other documents to make sure people are more aware. As for timing, maybe or anyone else, I know we've been working on a draft. There's versions of licensing bylaws, has many changes, so it's being worked on. But timing of it, I don't know. So
I think the best timing that we can give you would be early in 2018.
That's probably either way. It's not going to. If you go option one, it could be longer than that. It could be much longer than that. So. Potentially, sure. Go ahead.
So wouldn't we want to, if we know it's going to be early in 2018, wouldn't we want to freeze those permit requisitions if they came in January until we make this decision?
I think we can do that. We could tell anybody that we're not going to issue any more until we get a new approved policy or licensing bylaw. So I guess the question is option one or two, and I think I've heard option two a couple of times. Is there anybody who thinks option one's the best route? So then it is option two. So I guess the recommendation is, I'll read it again, that council approve option two as outlined herein. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Yeah, give that to me right now. And I have a motion now. It's adjourned. That's the end of our agenda. So I'll take this motion. It's been moved by Councillor Grace, second by Councillor Raj, that this planning committee meeting on November the 20th, 2017, hereby adjourned at 9:17 p.m. All in favor? It's adjourned.